All right. Well, in the Halitics, we've got Arlen with us for an Arlen Tuesday. And Arlen, I got your head to the right size. I know you were saying your head's too big, and I got to do all these weird adjustments. And sometimes these programs, it's amazing. This OBS that I use, I think it's called Online Broadcaster Software, something like that. And it is too powerful. There are just too many options. There are too many different things you can do. It's like an oven with about 900 settings. You don't know what to do when all you want to do is boil an egg.
Well, you know why my head looks so big? It's just my brain is so big. So we have to take that into consideration.
I've heard that theory. Sherlock Holmes, in one of his stories, judges one of his clients who left his hat behind must be very intelligent, even without having met the client. The client left his hat in the waiting room and then had to dash off before Holmes got to meet him. And he tells Dr. Watson he's certainly a very intelligent man. And Watson says, how can you possibly know that from his hat? And he says, look at the size. If there's that much head, there must be a large brain. But it's funny because in that story, at least, Conan Doyle has a little humor. And the client, it turns out, is not particularly intelligent at all, although they never refer back to Holmes' mistake there. His what do you call it again? His deduction was incorrect. It was not elementary.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's true. I don't think there's really a direct correlation between head size in humans and brain size. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, I'm going to go with it. But if you doubt it, we'll have to check into it.
I guess if you're a microcephalic, which is very small head, there may be some issues. But I think as long as you're within that range, geniuses and those who are perhaps less intelligent have all various sizes of heads. Anyone who wants to comment, please do 240-242-5646. We're going to certainly get to less relevant, less critically important topics than head size as we proceed in the show. But before we get to those, Arlen, how are you today? I always ask you that. We didn't get to that. How are you doing?
I'm doing just fine. I woke up this morning and there's white stuff all over everything. And I call it snow. Nancy calls it just kind of a dusting. But to me, it's snow.
Well, it's snow. It may not be a lot of snow. It could just be a little, as she says, just a little few flurries. But nevertheless, snow it is.
It covers everything. It covers everything. All the trees, all the lawn, everything. So to me, it's impressive. Since I'm not used to it, of course, being a Californian, but
or at least a coastal Californian, right? Because if you go inland about 100 miles or so, or you'll find plenty of snow. 200 miles into the Nevadas, you get, those 4-foot dumps that buried the Donner Party some time ago. You probably remember. Do you remember those the headlines when the Donner Party are on? Maybe that's a couple of years before your time.
Yeah. So
we were in Tahoe, and we did drive up to Truckee, which is where Donner Lake is, and it was incredibly hot. It was in the 90s. We were told, this was a summer before last, Arlen, that this was the hottest recorded temperature Lake Tahoe had ever experienced. And so the Donner Party probably wouldn't happen today if people were trucking across country in those wagons, because we've caused the temperature on the planet to rise to such a degree that there just isn't going to be that much snow as there used to be.
Not only that, but people can now deliver supper and food, with all these services. So
they probably wouldn't need to eat each other. They wouldn't need to eat each other. They could just call DoorDash and everything would be.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the point, but we'll let it go for now. Arlen, we got a lot of headlines. A little bit of. Go ahead. What is the point then?
As every kind of weather. I mean, you name it. It could be super hot. Could be snow. Could be ice. You look anywhere, whatever weather you want, you can find it in California, I think.
By the way, I see Khalid in the chat. It's great to see you, Khalid, or in the Facebook conversation. Good to see you. Thanks for weighing in. We'd love to talk to you, 240-242-5646, if you or anyone else wants to. And we've got a few folks, I think, in the YouTube chat as well. Arlen, all right, let's talk. Now, you said you were in a good mood, but You weren't in such a good mood yesterday when you took the rare step, I think perhaps almost unprecedented step, of calling me when you're not scheduled to be on the program. You're that exercised about the Democratic, fold, cave. I use the word appeasement. What did Tom Hartman called it? A betrayal, I believe.
Well, I know other people have. I was very upset, very angry about what just happened. And I saw your show on, so I said, I got to express my opinion. So I'm doing it a day early, but on Monday, but I'll get a little more into it today, I think.
Well, we'll get into it for sure. And again, if anyone wants to join us, 240-242-5646. Arlen, by the way, blogs at thebigpicturereport.com. He's got a piece up there by, I guess, his favorite host, Tom Hartman. And Hartman weighs in. And some of what Hartman wrote, I actually really agree with. We'll play a video clip with Bernie later in the program. But I always do. I don't always, Arlen, but you know me. I'm a stickler for that horrible situation in Israel and Gaza and Palestine. And it continues to be terrible. Now, I don't have any stories directly about Gaza, but I was really surprised and taken by this story in the New York Times, which hasn't, in my view, done a good job at all. I think it's been really remiss in covering the crimes of Israel. But to its credit, this opinion piece was published. I guess it went online maybe yesterday, but the date line there says November 11th this morning. So there is no ceasefire in the West Bank. So they're talking about how Israel is razing homes, sending bulldozers, cranes to actually tear down the homes of Palestinian people and basically make room for Israeli settlers, violence against olive pickers. It's just terrible, Arlen. What should, I mean, beyond the reaction of just abject horror, I guess, or disgust. I mean, should America do?
Well, they certainly need more people to speak up about it. I mean, Trump got a lot of credit for, this peace agreement in Gaza, and everybody thought, he deserved a lot of credit for that. And he constantly talks about how he's winning all these other wars, which he's not. He doesn't even know probably where many of these countries are. So, he's not really winning anything. But I think it's up to the American people, Congress, whatever, to say something about this, because it's horrible. I mean, it just keeps going on and on and on, and it'll probably go on forever, because I don't think Netanyahu is going to surrender. So at least it doesn't seem that way now.
Well, there you can see some of the homes in farm areas of the West Bank, Palestinians living in those houses, and they're being torn down by construction crews under the protection of the Israeli, I would call it the occupying forces there. We supply them. It's horrific. I mean, there's just I think genocide is a very fair term to use. People recoil against it. I don't. I think that's exactly what we're seeing. And this is, again, in the West Bank. I will say, again, the New York Times has, I think, been just horrible on this, although they're even worse media actors than the Times. But I give them credit. This is a pretty, this article is not in any way pulling punches. It's by Myrav Zonzine. I think she's Jewish. That's probably not relevant, but I thought it was interesting that a Jewish opinion writer was willing to be so harshly critical, and justly so, of Israel. She is a senior Israel analyst for the International Crisis Group, and Ms. Zonzai knows that 20 Palestinians were wounded by Israeli thugs when those Palestinians just went out to harvest olives. So this is a direct effort to make life absolutely insupportable for Palestinians.
Right. There's so many things that the Democrats are doing wrong, and one of them is they're ignoring what's going on with the brutality in Gaza, in Palestine, all those areas, and so many civilians are being killed, women, children, and everything, and nobody hardly is speaking up at all. Not that the Republicans are, because certainly they're not. They're totally in support of Israel. But the Democrats should be doing a lot more. There's a few of them that are, but certainly, not anywhere near a large number.
Well, Arlen, you mentioned things that the Democrats are doing wrong. That's usually my bailiwick. But let's, instead of going to the story that I was going to highlight first after we talked about the Middle East to some extent, which the story I was going to highlight was the excuse made, at least by one New York Times writer, the explanation for the decision to fold, not to continue the shutdown, is that the senators who voted to end the shutdown are old, or mostly old, not all of them, but 6 of them are over 60, 6 of the 8 are over 65, and a couple are in their, I believe, 80s. At least one is. Let's go to Michelle Goldberg. This is a piece you recommended. It kind of makes the same point, but it's not that the Democrats are, what did I say, old, out of touch, and out to lunch. That's how I described it for this program. Goldberg, a fan apparently of La Pelosi, says, nope, she's retiring. Good. Why did this story speak to Arlen Grossman, who, you're not as old as Nancy, but maybe as someone who's, a senior? I mentioned your close, your firsthand knowledge of the Donner Party. Shouldn't you like to have these folks who are, in your age cohort representing you? Does that make you feel good? You always talk about identity politics. We always talk about identity politics. We want more gays. We want more blacks. We want more trans people in Congress. What about more old people?
Well, I'm young at heart, Helen, and that may be the difference. But you can see that the older ones, the ones that voted, to continue or to shut down the government, are, not only are they old, they're also retiring. They don't have any real future in the party. And I suspect they're doing it because they hear from their constituents about how horrible things are, and we need to do something. But it all seems so crazy because the Democrats were doing so well. I mean, we were winning big time, with that election, with approval ratings, and all of a sudden these senators yanked it away. So, it just makes no sense.
It certainly does seem to be a great example of the snatching defeat from the jaws of victory dynamic. Arlen, I understand what you're saying. Maybe seniors were afraid, and many of them are seniors. We'll put their ages up in just a second. Maybe some seniors were contacting them to say, we're worried about our Medicare, we're worried about our retirement payments or our Social Security. So that seems plausible to me. But if they felt that this is what the American people want, then I go back to this question that I think others have had. Why then was the decision made, or why then is it only retiring or senators who are not up for election who voted to stop the shutdown? I mean, you'd think if this was something that the American people wanted, that there was a demand from voters, that they would say, well, this is what people want, so we're going to end it. We're not going to go against the will of our own supporters. But in fact, not one of those 8 is up for election next year.
Exactly. And I think what they're thinking is maybe short term. My constituents are suffering and I need to do something to help them out. And Trump doesn't seem to want to bend on anything. But I think it's the younger people are thinking more long term. We've got to defeat Trump. And, we were just started to make some progress. And that should be more important than, So some people wouldn't get their SNAP benefits, and some people will lose their funding for health care and all that. But we have Donald Trump now in a good position for us. He's hurting. His approval ratings are down. a few of his Republican cohorts are, kind of taking a little bit of a different point of view on certain things. So, it's like snatching defeat from victory. It just doesn't make any sense.
Well, Arlen, here's the thumbnail again with those ages. I didn't put Fetterman's, I think he's 55, and Cortez Masto, who actually is 61, but she's not, I just went with people who are considered seniors, but 61 isn't exactly young. Neither even as if you're in your 50s. Schumer, 74, and do you think it's unfair for me to put him there as the kind of the puppet master, the top left of the shot? Because he did vote against the shutdown, Arlen. Or he did vote against ending the shutdown. Let me say it that way.
Yeah, well, the word is that he should have done a lot more. That he's in control. He's the Democratic leader in the Senate, and he should be more on top of what's going on, and push what he thinks is best for the party. And if he thinks what they did is best for the party, then he needs to go too.
Well, I asked you this yesterday when you called in. Do you think it's quite possible that Schumer actually wanted the shutdown to end? As you said, maybe he thought this was the right decision, either for himself personally, for other Democratic senators personally, but because he wants to be reelected, he wants to stay in the U.S. Senate, hoping to keep his leadership position. He felt that politically it would be untenable for him to end the shutdown or to vote to end the shutdown. Do you think that's plausible?
Oh, yeah, I think that is true. Schumer's, as you know, in the spring, Schumer said, hey, let's keep the government going against the wishes of a lot of progressive Democrats. And, he this time he changed his course a little bit, but, people expect more of him. The Republicans are so, emphatic and strong about everything. And Schumer, by comparison, looks kind of weak.
I'll tell you a couple things I find really interesting about that group there, Arlen. One, I always thought of Dick Durbin as one of the more, I don't want to exactly say progressive, but he certainly was never one of the more corporatist or right-leaning Democrats in my history, as I recall, in the history that I can remember. So I was a little surprised to see him voting to end the shutdown. Obviously, Fetterman, he's basically become a Republican. Tim Kaine is the less conservative of the two Virginia Democratic senators. Mark Warner is definitely more to the right, but he did not vote to end the shutdown. And I think that's because, and I suspected, but I looked it up. Even before I looked it up, I suspected it was because Warner's running for re-election. So doesn't this tell you that this is really, that I guess I'll put it this way. Doesn't this tell you this is not what the voters want?
Well, now that I look at all these people and think about it, I want to know who led these people to do what they did at this time. So, so soon after, an excellent election and everything, somebody must have led this group. I'd like to know who it is. Is it a Republican? Because, it's certainly not the will of the average Democratic voter.
Do you think it's Chuck Schumer? I mean, I would answer that it seems the answer would obviously be Chuck Schumer. He is their leader.
Yeah, but he voted differently than these guys, but he should be a little bit stronger and have a little bit more sway. And when I say, who's the leader for these guys, I don't think it's Schumer because he voted the other way, but I don't know. I don't understand it.
All right, Arlen, does this in any way, one of the areas where you and I have disagreed, I think we both have a long-term dream for what America would look like that's actually very similar, with a lot less inequality, addressing poverty, and end to imperialistic wars. I mean, I think in a lot of ways we see a future America ideal similarly, but we have different, perhaps paths, divergent routes to get there. Does this cause you to sort of think, well, gee, maybe Hal has something there when he's saying the Democratic Party is not redeemable, that we're wasting our time trying to, against all odds, to push these corrupt warmongers, these sociopaths, these people who have done so much harm to our country, who consistently lie to us. Gee, maybe wasn't such a good idea to say we should vote for them. Has that even occurred to you at all?
Well, of course, I'm disappointed in the Democratic Party, especially that they lost so badly in 2024 to Trump. And they've changed over the years. They used to be the party of the working people, and they're no longer the party of the working people. Now they take so many big donations from billionaires and corporations like the Republicans do that they're just not the same party they used to be. But then again, you have the thought of, what are choices really? I mean, if you don't like the Democrats, you can't vote for the Republicans. I don't think, if you think like we do. So of course you'll say a third party, but third parties don't seem to have any real chance. It's not realistic at this time.
And see, that's where I get frustrated, because it seems to me that's our job, right? I mean, for whatever little influence we have. And I actually had this exact disagreement. By the way, on this exact topic, folks, tomorrow, Andy Ellis, running for governor of the state of Maryland, my state, will be joining us. So I'm really looking forward to talking to Andy. He is running as a Green. We had Andy on a few times before. He's got a really exciting campaign. We'll be talking to his running mate next week. So we'll talk about that later. But really looking forward to speaking to Andy. So I think it's our job, Arlen. You've got a blog. Why don't you push the Green Party in your blog? And I'm not trying to be funny, but I'm dead serious. Isn't that something we would want from Tom Hartman, who has a much bigger audience than either of us? Or the New York Times? Why couldn't the New York Times couldn't even bring itself to endorse Bernie or even to speak positively? They couldn't even endorse Zoran. I mean, and these are Democrats. Isn't this something we want from our media, is a little tiny bit of willingness to contemplate alternatives to this bleak reality that we live in right now?
I think the general feeling for most Democrats is that they'd like to see the party move a little bit to the left, become more progressive. That's more realistic if they're going to win elections. Third parties are, the chances of them winning an election are very, very slim. But if the Democratic Party could improve, could make some changes, could make up some policies that make it seem as if they're helping the working people, which they're trying to, and healthcare and all those good things. I just think that'd be better if the Democrats moved left rather than a third party.
Well, I would agree with you. I think it would be great if the Democrats moved left. No argument. I absolutely would. But we're not seeing that, are we? That hasn't happened.
No. But we've never been at such a low point as we are right now, with Trump in office and, he and all the things that he's doing. This is, I think the Democrats hopefully have a wake-up call. This shouldn't have happened, but it did, and they lost. They have absolutely no power anymore in government. So if they don't start rethinking their positions, it's going to only get worse.
All right, we've got Arlen with us on Halitics as an Arlen Tuesday. We're always happy to have him on and appreciate his wit and wisdom. TheBigPictureReport.com is where Arlen blogs. All right, let me go from bashing the Democratic Party to bashing the New York Times. It's pretty things just don't really change here very much. You can kind of write, the script writes itself pretty much. So this is Michelle Goldberg. No, this is not Michelle Goldberg. I'm sorry. We talked about Michelle's argument that we need to move. No, this is Goldberg. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's Goldberg. This is all her piece. Pelosi is retiring. Good, because there were two articles. I'm sorry, folks. I confused myself, and then I might have confused you. Two articles about age, but this is the one by Goldberg. So she's trying to justify her claim that the Democrats are too old, and she says, I think it's beyond peradventure true. So she says, among the reasons for Mamdani's triumph was his intuitive understanding of new media. From quick viral videos to long-form podcasts, an equally intuitive grasp of the desperation of downwardly mobile young people clinging to their place in a city growing ever more affordable. So I think that's true, but you don't have to be young, right, to understand that. Lots of seniors are also struggling, and they're even, I mean, one area where Trump seems to garner praise, I don't know how much it's deserved, is his seeming understanding of new media. He's constantly tweeting. He's on his, social, what is it, Your Social or social, whatever his group thing is. I forget what they call that. Truth Social, right? So to me, Mamdani's win, yes, he's charismatic, he's good looking, blah, blah, blah. He just said what people want. He said he was going to govern in a way people want the city to be governed, which he gets to with the unaffordable issue, by the way.
And I think a really key sentence in what you have on the screen right now is the last sentence, that he won young men in New York City. Democrats have really struggled with young men, and he won by 34 points. That's very impressive. So, there's a lot of things that the reasons why Mamdani did so well. I mean, he is, like you say, charismatic, he's energetic, he's good looking, he speaks well, totally the opposite compared to somebody, older and more experienced who's had a lot of problems. And I'm thinking of Cuomo, of course. So anyway, it turned out well, I think. I wish the rest of the country were more like New York City, but it isn't. And, we could only make so much out of this, but
is it not, though? Is it not like New York City? Aren't there plenty of places throughout our country where every day Americans feel like life is getting more difficult, more of a challenge? Their ability to pay the rent, to live a decent life has become more fraught, more challenging. I would say New York City is, in many ways, people who live there are often more privileged than those around the country. That's where I really am frustrated with Goldberg. That's really where I disagree with her. She says many aspects of Mamdani's campaign may not be replicable outside a liberal metropolis. 100% disagree. You talk about things like healthcare. It's much easier, for example, to find a doctor, to find a hospital, to get treated in New York City. Now, it's going to be expensive, but you go to the emergency room, you get treated. You live in somewhere in East Texas or West Texas. I really should say West Texas, not East Texas, depending where in East Texas. West Texas, you may be hours and hours from a hospital. The salaries there are so much lower that people are really desperate when they have to buy something that isn't locally sourced. So I think that it's very easy to see how his style campaign would be extremely successful in especially red states. The 34%, right? He won all those young men.
That's great. But you have to figure New York City also is very heavily Democratic, which is not, the rest of the country does not necessarily have so many Democrats. So, but I think people more and more are seeing that Trump is not doing what he says he was going to do, or he keeps saying, inflation's going down, everything's good, when all people need to do is just go to the supermarket like I did this morning and notice the prices keep going up, and price of utilities and gas and all kinds of things. So everybody can see that Trump.
Arlen, for some reason you kind of went faded on me, like you're like all pixelated. And you are still using that cable, right, to connect? Because that seems to work much better.
Yeah, I am.
I wonder what happened, because it was good. No, I assumed you were, because it looked really good, and then suddenly, this is the vagaries of internet in Vermont. I have to say, I've had the same issue when I was in Vermont, so I think that's the problem.
Yeah, for a moment, the screen just stopped for about a second or two. I don't know if you saw that or aware of that, and then after that, this is what we get. And then I can't explain it because I'm not doing anything different.
I think it's, I think this is the answer is you just don't live in Vermont. I mean, who cares about the scenery, the beauty, getting away from it all? Forget, if you don't have really, really good high-speed internet, I don't want to go to your place. There it is.
I think
That's
it might be, it could be Homeland Security, it could be ICE doing this. Who knows? But yeah,
one thing I found
it helps
interesting,
if we have-
totally to change the subject 100 degrees, although 180 degrees, although it's still on the internet issue. Have you noticed this? Like now, when you go online, people who are they're called digital nomads. You know, a digital nomad is somebody who can do their work anywhere. They write for magazine or something. They can write anywhere. I could almost be a digital nomad if I did my podcasts. Of course, I don't make any money, but people who actually make a living writing or using media, using social media or content creators can live anywhere. So there's all these different cities they recommend. It's actually very interesting. And one of the big factors, high-speed internet. Also, lots of internet cafes. That's what these content creators want. They want internet cafes.
Yeah, and not only that. I mean, I think it's just interesting. There was a story in the New York Times on Sunday about a certain group of people that are anti-technology. They're pushing back against smartphones and computers and all that. So, I think a lot of people see that there is harm coming from these new technologies, and it's all and it's only going to get worse. I mean, when you think about AI, so it's a whole new world out there, and I wish I knew more about it and how to function with it. But
I'm with you. I think
rapidly.
there's a whole host of problems, maybe more problems than solutions that come from the internet and from technology. But just to put a bow on that issue of the digital nomad and the ideal cities, it's kind of interesting because a lot of the cities that we look at, I think our generation, maybe younger people too, who say, oh, these are the most beautiful cities where there's great art and culture, like London, Paris, Madrid. They're not necessarily the top destinations for digital nomads just because they're expensive. So what they're focused on is finding more affordable, but also with some culture. So maybe smaller cities in Portugal, which is less expensive, in Italy, which can be less expensive, Eastern Europe, if they have good internet, that's where these digital nomads often settle down. It's quite interesting.
And how I think it's a big problem, the fact that people are getting this internet technology all throughout the world, because a lot of the poor countries are, hacking us and trying to spam us and all those things. And it's something you can't control. They're everywhere, and they could do almost anything. So it's a tough problem.
All right, let's get back to politics, although there were some political, obviously, implications in our conversation just now with Arlen Grossman, the what do I call the thought leader, the California thought leader. Oh, and we did talk about, did we talk about the election? We talked about it last week, right? Because Prop 50 passed. I guess we haven't even done. You must have been quite excited, Arlen, because we did not talk about either Mamdani's win or Prop 50 passing, since that happened after you and I spoke last Tuesday. But leaving aside Mamdani for a moment, I'm sure you're very delighted that Prop 50 won by a very wide margin.
Yeah, of course I am. But it seems like the Democrats and the anti-Trumpers pretty much swept that election. So it's no surprise that we did well in a blue state like California and are getting some new districts and all that. And I've also just happened to be looking at the newspaper today, and there's a number of states that are resisting some of the Republican redistricting. So it's not all cut and dried, and we'll have to see how it turns out. But yeah, I don't think it's going to be helping the Republicans that much come election time.
Well, your governor, like him, love him, hate him, however you are. I'm pretty mixed on Gavin. I won't say I hate Newsom. He's not my least favorite Democrat, but I have a lot of issues with him as well. I think he represents a lot of problematic features in the party as well. Nevertheless, he has been pretty good at the resistance, better than certainly Schumer as an example. And he, knowing where the wind blows, came out very strongly against that shutdown deal, Arlen. I guess basking in the wake of Prop 50 win, he's saying, why the hell, after we blow the Republicans' doors off, are you giving in to them? Because we got nothing, right? Democrats got nothing out of that deal.
They really, yeah, not at all, nothing at all. And yeah, Newsom, I agree with you. There's some problems with him. I don't like him 100%, but he certainly seems like an ideal candidate right now. I mean, he's young and impressive, articulate. He knows how to use the media. He would be a strong opponent against Trump, and I'd like to see him do that. But of course, if we're talking about the next president, we're talking about 2028, so that's a long way away.
It's a little bit off. Does look like his opponent is almost certainly going to be J.D. Vance, unless Trump somehow figures out a way to try to continue to run. I understand Marco Rubio made the statement that J.D. Vance was going to be the nominee in 28. I think Republicans are trying to cut off any efforts by Trump to remain on the ballot or to somehow stay in office. So they're already anointing Vance. You think Newsom would be a strong candidate against J.D. Vance, recognizing we're talking over 2 years?
Well, yeah, I don't think J.D. Vance is very popular. I think a lot of people just don't like him for various reasons. And, he's taken some controversial points of view, and he's a little bit different than Trump on some things. But, yeah, I would like to see Newsom against somebody like J.D. Vance, because J.D. Vance is not Donald Trump, and he's not nearly as popular as Donald Trump. So, yeah, let's do it.
All right, good to see Ari in the chat right now. Hey, Ari. I don't think Trump's very popular, though. Remember, Trump's approval ratings have really dropped of late. He always was known for having a very low ceiling, but a relatively high floor. In other words, his approval ratings were never going to drop below a certain level because there was a certain percentage of Americans who always were going to back him. And it turns out that percentage fell, that were backing him as a result. It would certainly appear of the shutdown. So the Democrats took away that great weapon they were using, hand it right back to Trump. So terrible strategizing by them. I would attribute it. I haven't used the word corruption, but I think it was corruption. I think they just heard from their donor class, their donor base, they had to give up this fight. It wasn't good for business, and that what they were fighting for wasn't good for business either, and they wanted it to end. That is the corporations, the multi-billion and the multi-billionaires. Chuck Schumer saw exactly where the wind was blowing, said to his Democratic delegation, we're going to have to end this. Who's willing to take a bullet for the team and vote to end the shutdown? And those will be people who are retiring, like Durbin, I believe, is retiring. And the other one, maybe Shaheen. And the others, hey, you don't have election for 2 years, 4 years. I think that's what happened. Let me ask you this, Arlen. Do you think Gavin Newsom would have beaten Trump last year? You were supportive of Kamala. I used to criticize her, and you would defend her, and very admirably, I might add. I take the position Newsom would have been a stronger candidate against Trump. I thought he would have been. I didn't think he would necessarily win, but I thought he would have been a better candidate. I believed Chris Van Hollen was the Democrat who had the best chance to beat Trump. Nobody talked about him. What do you think? Would Gavin Newsom have likely won the White House if he had run?
I wouldn't be surprised, especially if he had the time to do it. I mean, he's conservatively more favorable to people than Joe Biden, and Kamala Harris never really had a chance. So, and Donald Trump really didn't win that overwhelmingly, even though he likes to say he had a mandate. It really wasn't that big on the popular vote. So, I think Newsom would have a very good, especially now, would have a very good shot.
Let's go to a politician I think we both have voted for in the past. By the way, you never vote in Vermont, even though you live there, right? You've always been
No, I do vote in Vermont. Well, no, you're right. I don't vote on the Vermont ballot, but I have the California ballot mailed to me, and I mail it back to California.
Now, I like the way you were very literal in that answer, because, yeah, when I said you don't vote in Vermont, I meant in Vermont elections. But you were like, well, I'm actually in the state of Vermont when I fill out my ballot. So I understand. So you haven't voted for him in Vermont elections, but you have voted for, I assume, in national elections when he's run for president in Democratic primaries. Bernie feeling the same way we do. I want to play this clip from Blue Sky that Hartman actually shared. Let's see if it works. Oh, it looks like it's not working. Here we go.
Tonight, 8 Democrats voted with the Republicans to allow them to go forward on this continuing resolution. And to my mind, this was a very, very bad vote. What it does, first of all, is it raises healthcare premiums for over 20 million Americans by doubling, and in some cases tripling or quadrupling. People can't afford that when we are already paying the highest prices in the world for healthcare. Number 2, it paves the way for 15 million people to be thrown off of Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act. Studies show that will mean that some 50,000 Americans will die every year unnecessarily. And all of that was done to give $1 trillion in tax breaks to the 1%. As everybody knows, just on Tuesday, we had an election all over this country. And what the election showed is that the American people want us to stand up to Trumpism, to his war against working class people, to his authoritarianism. That is what the American people wanted, but tonight, that is not what happened. So we've got to go forward, do the best that we can to try to protect working class people, to make sure that the United States not only does not throw people off of health care, but ends the absurdity of being the only major country on earth that doesn't guarantee health care to all people. We got a lot of work to do. But to be honest with you, tonight was not a good night. Thank you.
All right, so very strong by Bernie. I got no arguments with anything he said.
Tonight,
do you, Arlen?
Democrats voted with the Republicans to...
Let me just turn that off. Go ahead, yeah.
Well, I'm just saying, that's no surprise that Bernie would be feeling this bad about it. I think his number one issue has been health care. And, I'd like to have $1 for every time he said we're the only, major country that doesn't give health care to all its citizens. I mean, he must be terribly frustrated because, that, like I say, that is his issue. And they're pretty much trampling on it right now.
Arlen, I know you've made the point. You think that the Democratic Party can be reformed, is redeemable, even though you're very frustrated, obviously upset about this latest betrayal, as Hartman calls it. But when you look at at least in the Senate, I don't really see any Democrats accepting Bernie, and he isn't technically a Democrat. I mean, I think we all think of him as a Democrat, but he's an independent. So when he's in his mid-80s, I mean, where's the progressive leadership going to come from? Where is the voice of a conscience? Where's the conscience of the Senate going to be? They used to call Senator Ted Kennedy the voice, the conscience of the Senate. Now I would have to say it's Bernie. What happens when he's gone?
Yeah, no, I certainly agree. I mean, I certainly say that I'd like to see the Democratic Party get more progressive, but I never said it's going to be easy because, there's a lot of forces that make it difficult. There's so much money that goes into winning campaigns and, it's hard to buck that. So, yeah, I think the Democrats as a more progressive party would have to evolve over time. I don't know if we have that time, but, we're certainly getting people like, Mondami and AOC and hopefully a few other very progressive Democrats that, maybe could use their sway to, talk to the other Democrats and maybe make some progress.
All right. Besides Mamdani, and I accept him not because I don't think he's incredibly important, being mayor of the state of New York is a big deal. I'm not in any way minimizing that, but he's not going to be running for U.S. Senate anytime soon. He's got 4 years minimum as the mayor of the state of New York. He may run again. He may win. So he's not somebody who's going to be running for federal office for quite some time, if ever. So do you see anyone either who's currently in the Senate and doesn't even have to be a Democrat, or who might run for Senate, who you think could replace Bernie, take Bernie's spot as the, a true voice of the people? Did you see someone like that?
Absolutely. The first person that comes to my mind is AOC. She's very popular, probably in New York, and I think she could beat him. You
think she can beat Schumer, and you think she will try to beat Schumer? There'll probably be some other candidates besides her as well running. I think it's going to be tough. I'm not nearly as much of a fan as you are. I have a lot of issues with her. I like Bernie. I do. I remember getting into a conversation back and forth with it was someone who at the time was further to the left than I am on social media. And we were talking about candidates. And I wasn't saying it was okay to vote for Biden exactly, but I tried to explain and justify why someone might do so. And the person was not having it and just saying, this guy's awful. He's a warmonger. He's this, he's that, a corporatist. On balance, I think she was probably right. But I said to her, well, who's okay? Who's good enough? And she said, well, Bernie's good enough. Not that he's good, but he's good enough. I question if AOC is good enough.
Well, I'll tell you what, I don't think Schumer is popular anymore. I don't think he would get that much support from the voters, the Democratic voters in New York, and somebody like AOC could, because she is a great speaker, very dynamic, has great ideas. She's young, kind of like Aunt Tommy, So I'd like to see her run.
Well, I'll cut her a little slack. I have problems with her, but excuse me, folks. I know my throat, a little bit of a scratch. I'm definitely recovering them on the mend, but I know it doesn't sound fun to hear. Look, I'm going to cut her a little slack. I think she's still trying to find her way. She's bent the knee far too many times to the Democratic elites. She's made deals I hate, but maybe there's a hope that she really will govern on the left. Possibly. So if she wins more powerful offices. So I'm willing to say, hey, that's a possibility. I'm willing to go that far. I would throw another name out there. I think this guy in Maine, Graham Plattner, who is actually running for the Senate, right? AOC's in the House. Plattner's running for the Senate. The last legit poll came out with him having a huge lead, may have lost some of that because of that quote Nazi unquote tattoo on his chest. By the way, would that affect you, the fact that he had that? It wasn't a swastika, it was a Totenkopf, the death's head insignia of the SS. He says he didn't know what it was. He's going to get it removed or covered up. Did you find that problematic, Arlen?
I'm willing to take his word for it. If his total career and all his policies and thoughts up until then have been pretty good, I think that's, people get strange tattoos when they're young, and, he probably did not know the full significance of what it represented.
Yeah, to me, it's such a nothing burger. It's such a non-story. I mean, the guy's 40 years old. We're talking about stuff that happened long before he was born. It wasn't a Nazi swastika. It wasn't a swastika. I can't, I care about policy, and, the billionaires, they care about policy. That's why they all backed Cuomo. They don't care about whether he was, slapping fannies and killing grannies. They don't care as long as it makes them money. That's what they care about. And I think we have to have that same attitude when we vote. Whose policies will make life better for poor, struggling, and working people? It seems clear Plattner's will. So,
let me add one more thing about AOC. I think she's thinking long term. We were talking about short term thinking, long term thinking. I think she sees that she does have a future in the party, and she's trying to get along with everybody in the Democratic Party, and I think hoping that she will eventually become the progressive candidate that the Democrats want.
Yeah, I think where we disagree there is I don't want somebody who wants to get along with all the Democrats. I want somebody who's going to take the party on, who's going to challenge it, who's going to confront it. And I understand what you're saying is, well, if you're going to do that, you want to do so from a position of strength, make allies. I understand all that. I think we're past that point. I think the party needs a much stronger medicine than she's giving it. But time will tell, Arlen. I don't utterly reject your argument. Let's get back to this Hartman report.
I think
no, go ahead.
She's progressive with her views. She criticizes Israel. She's not afraid to take progressive views and go with them. And so I'm hoping she will continue to do that.
Hope you're right. I really do. I think that would be great if she turns out to be better than I fear she is. And has the power to make a difference. I hope you're right, Arlen. Just back to this Hartman headline for a second, because I was asking about that Trump's $2,000 dividend before, and both of us were a little unclear what it represented. Did you look that up? Were you able to kind of nail that down a little bit?
Not exactly, but I think what it represents is that people will change their votes for money, and if they see something that would benefit them financially, then they would be happy with it. They would go for it, and I think that's probably what Trump is trying to do. He's trying to find ways to give money to people. He talks about talked about helping out certain. For one thing, healthcare. There's some talk about that, helping people who are struggling with getting health insurance to giving them some money so they can make their own decisions. But I think overall, I think.
Well, I'll just jump in because I think the reason we were both struggling to understand what Trump was talking about is that Trump wasn't very clear about what he was talking about. But I do also fault Hartman for using that $2,000 dividend in his headline without clarifying what Hartman is talking about, or explaining that Trump threw $2,000 out there but didn't really know what he was talking about, which I think is the case. So I do sort of fault Hartman because I don't like that headline. This is misleading. Bottom line is, Trump did mention in some, I guess, social media posts, Truth Social, people that are against tariffs are fools. Now, he and I agree. I think you cannot have an advanced first world economy without tariffs that will work for poor, struggling working people. You just can't. I don't believe that. I think you have to have tariffs. That said, then he goes on, a dividend of at least $2,000 a person will be paid to everyone. I think he's maybe suggesting that the revenues from the tariffs will be so great that they can give everyone a $2,000 tax break, maybe not including high income people. So we'll see if that, there's any truth to that, but that's about as close as we can come. I don't like the way Hartman says his Nazi-infested social media site. Come on, man. If you want people to vote the way you want them to vote, don't call them Nazis. Explain to them why you think it's in their best interest to vote for the candidates you like better. That's just my view.
Yeah, but if you look at Twitter, the X, there's just a lot of right-wing hate out there. A lot of people who are anti-Semitic, racist, and all this kind of stuff. And it's true. That's probably what it's all about.
Well, it's true. They're cesspools, no question about it. And I don't always walk my walk. I talk my talk, but I can be pretty critical, certainly more so of Democrats. So, it's easy to say, but sometimes hard to live by that golden rule. 240-242-5646. We're sort of coming up hard on the hour. I will close off the show at 3 unless we got a call or something, some topic we get into that's becomes a barn burner, if you will. But Arlen, anything that I missed? I think those were the stories you had recommended. Was there one that you would email me that I missed? I'm not certain about that. Because if there is, I want you to talk about it.
Nancy Pelosi.
Well, we did talk about her retiring and how her age was against her. And Michelle Goldberg, a big fan of Pelosi. I would say, since you brought that up, when Pelosi first came into Congress in the early 90s, I believe, you might know better because you were Californian, I'm not, although she was San Francisco based always. From Baltimore, by the way. Very interesting story about her. She was the daughter of Mayor D'Alessandro of Baltimore, who was like the ultimate kind of, guard, what do they call it? Retail politician. He would go to people's houses. He knocked on doors. He went, walked down Main, St. Charles Street Avenue or St. Charles, I think it's called Avenue now. He used to be called St. Charles Street Avenue. Not sure what they called it in 1947. He would go to every store. He would reach out to every shopkeeper, buy their food, groceries. When we were rummaging through my father-in-law's effects after his death, we actually found, I was fascinated by this, Arlen. It was a bulletin from a Baltimore synagogue thanking Mayor D'Alessandro for speaking at the synagogue in honor of the establishment of the state of Israel. So the Zionism in the Pelosi family, well, he was D'Alessandro, goes way back. Now, it's very different times. I'm not going to criticize him for going to the synagogue in 48. But I thought that was fascinating. I mean, this was who he was. He was a real hands-on type politician. Pelosi, different, more elitist, more, she was running the show. She was pulling the strings. But when she came into Congress, she was thought to be a reformer. She was considered to be a progressive.
Well, she did a lot of good things. And I think at one point, Michelle Goldberg mentioned something about Hakeem Jeffries as no Nancy Pelosi. She got things done. She got the Obamacare and lots of other things. She was very smart, and people respected her. So, she, when they, write books about her, I think it'll be very positive because, like you say, she had the background, she has the talent, she's very smart. Well,
she was very good at the backroom deals. There's no question. Well, she figured it out more than other people. She was certainly on many social issues to the left. I believe she championed same-sex marriage, and I give her a lot of credit for that. She never played the woman card. She was critical of Hillary Clinton for talking about how Hillary would say she was, getting a raw deal because she was a woman, she was mistreated. And Pelosi said, I don't do that. I just try to be the best politician I can and let people judge me based on that. So I give Pelosi credit for some of those areas. On the other hand, I think as she got older, and this goes to Goldberg's point, she did become less of a progressive. She did move to the right. She became very rigid. Witness her attacks on AOC, who you seem to, who you like better than I do. So that supports Goldberg's claim or, article where she says it's good Pelosi stepping down. Would you like to see, and I guess Nancy Pelosi about 85 years old, would you like to see, maybe she's not that old, would you like to see an age limit? You would?
Yeah, I think an age limit would be a good idea. I think it would be very popular in this country. I think people realize that, our candidates that were representing us shouldn't be as old as the Pope. They should be better able to represent the average voter if they were, in their 50s and 60s. Those would probably be the ideal ages.
Yeah, I don't like doing that. I wish that people naturally didn't just keep reelecting those who have clearly are no longer capable of doing the job. I mean, we do see voters repeatedly reelect these octogenarians. Yeah. Septuagenarians in their 70s. These are people in their 80s. You saw that post I put, Angus King and Dick Durbin, both over 80. That's a huge problem. But if that's who voters want, shouldn't they get it? I mean, is the problem that voters are electing people who are too old, or is it that there isn't enough challenge to these voters? Is incumbency too powerful? Maybe we have to take away the power of incumbency to some degree.
Well, I think you're right about that. Incumbency is a big factor, and people just get in the habit of voting for somebody. If they're generally feeling that politician, agrees with them, then they're all for it. But I think voters also are more and more realizing that we're not doing so well with some of these older candidates. I mean, Trump is 79, and all these Democratic leaders are much older than they used to be. So I think if you had a vote in this country, an age limit would win.
Say again.
If we had a vote in this country, I think having an age limit where you can't run anymore would win.
What about, it's not just age. It's not even just the power of incumbency. It's also the power of names. So your representative on the Central Coast, Jimmy Panetta, his last name is very familiar. His father obviously represented the Central Coast, Sam far in between. Was Jimmy Panetta the best possible person to run? I mean, you'd have to believe he wasn't, but because of his name, he had a huge head start. And again, I don't know what we do about this, because people get into a rut and for me, it's very odd too, because I never think of those things. I just vote for the person I think is best. I don't worry about their names, and I just look at their policies.
Well, people do like that. They like, a family name like the Bushes that goes on for a long time, and they think that's a good thing. And it just really depends on, how people feel about, the particular candidate, I guess. Sometimes they just make a mistake.
Right. Voters do make mistakes, but then often are very loath to change. Oh, I just lost Arlen for 1 sec. We'll get him back, I promise. No problem with that. There we go. There you go, Arlen. Yeah, I wanted to check and see what happened was, I know what I could have done to avoid that. I'm just checking my emails. The reason I want to check my emails now is not because, I'm getting a frantic text from my broker that I have to sell, my peace stocks because the war's been declared. No, I want to see whether there was another article, because I didn't want to short shrift you. If you come on and you have something you want to discuss, I think I got them all in, but I'm not sure. Otherwise, we will call it a Halitics Tuesday. And Arlen, again, I'm really looking forward to speaking tomorrow to Andy Ellis, who's running for running for governor here in Maryland. I would love it if we ran for president. We have to be willing to think outside the box. That's the thing. Like you were talking about the power of incumbency. Well, it's the power of the party too. It's like people think, well, it's either a Democrat or it's a Republican. It's either the same old or it's the same old, but from it with a different bottle. I think we have to be willing to think differently.
Well, wouldn't he be running against Westmore?
Well, what's wrong with that? That's good.
Well, I think Westmore is one of the better politicians out there. I'm sure there's better people than Westmore, but he's one of the better ones, I think.
Well, Westmore isn't for universal single-payer health care. That's a huge, incredibly important issue. I believe Westmore has stymied calls for hikes in taxes on the rich. He's been against that. Now, Westmore vetoed a bill to research reparations. Now, I personally am not a fan of reparations. I probably would have voted for that bill because I think on balance, it would have made things a little bit better across the state. But I don't think we should use race as a proxy for poverty. I think we should use poverty as a proxy for poverty. But, Andy has a different view on that. But Moore has been a decided centrist. He really hasn't been a progressive, in my opinion.
All right. Yeah, I'm sure you're right about that, because you follow him a lot more than I do. He just, from a distance, he sounds really good, but he's probably got a lot of problems too.
He's a finance guy, came out of Wall Street. But Arlen, that said, remember, I'm to your left. So somebody that I find somewhat moderate and centrist too much for my way of thinking, you might like. So we can have different views there. But in any event, yeah, he's not my favorite. I look forward to speaking to Andy. And even if I liked Westmore, honestly, Arlen, I would welcome the challenge, because if Andy has good ideas and in some areas I like him better than Moore, then maybe that'll push Moore to be a better governor.
That would be nice. I think, I think people are pretty much fed up with all these old candidates who are not thinking young, and so people are looking for alternatives, and maybe the beating Westmore would be a start. But you look at people like Chuck Schumer and Donald Trump, and they're really up there in age, and they're not thinking young. I think the Republican Party, more than the Democratic Party, has a lot more young people, and they're more dynamic and more willing to take risks and things like that. So, the Democrats are just too old at this point.
All right, and before we go, I did find the piece I knew there was something you'd recommend. It was an article by Ezra Klein. I think he pretty much regurgitated a lot of the same points we've already made, so we really didn't need to get into it. There's also what I would recommend if you're curious about an in-depth dive into the strategy that the Democrats may or may not have been following. I think Nate Silver and his Silver Bulletin has a good free post that I liked as well, but I never got a chance to discuss it. But before we go, you mentioned there seems to be at least a little bit more maybe dynamism, vibrancy on the Republican side. That may be true. I don't say it's not. What Goldberg says, and I think she's right, is this is a new development. The Democrat Party used to be certainly perceived as, and I think was reason, as the party of younger ideas. Certainly FDR, not a young president when he was elected, but he was a lot younger than these guys, and his ideas were totally new. They were completely from out of the blue. All this Social Security and a jobs government makes jobs, government builds power plants, government, wins a war. I mean, this was big stuff. And same with JFK, not my favorite president, but a young president, youngest ever elected at the time. LBJ totally took the party to new places. So we're really seeing a party that's aged, becomes calcified, staid. And I think that's important to understand when you look at Trump and why he is elected.
Yeah, when you look at the groups who helped Trump win, I mean, young men certainly were an important factor, and young people, minorities. And so, the Democrats need to show people that they are, thinking new thoughts and have new ideas. And because, what they have now is just not working.
All right, Arlen, that's been great. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Always learn. I appreciate it. I think our audience does as well. I'll be back tomorrow. We'll have Arlen next week, next Tuesday, for another Tuesday with Arlen. And everyone else, thank you so much for being part of Halitics.
All right, thanks, Al.
Thanks, Arlen. Get my music playing. I think it's on there now.